How much would you pay to have a house? Well, in London, it's going to cost you around 710,000 USD. In New York, USA, it'll cost you around 773,000. In Sydney, Australia, it'll cost you around 1.4 million. And in Singapore, it'll cost you a whopping 1.8. Land is expensive, and owning some is going to cost you a lot of money. It's the same in Final Fantasy XIV, the popular online RPG, where having a house is very costly. But in Final Fantasy XIV, it might cost you your arm, your health, and a good chunk of your life. Let me explain. In the real world, housing is really expensive because of scarcity, supply, and demand. In a city, there's only so much land that's available to use to build a house, and everyone wants a piece of that land. But there aren't enough houses to go around for everyone, and that drives the price way up. Some places are more desirable to some people to live in than others, and that's why a home in a city like San Francisco, California costs about 1.5 million on average, but a house in Charleston, West Virginia is only going to cost 165K. It works the same in Final Fantasy. A lot of people want a piece of that land, so the houses cost a lot of gil. That's the game's in-game currency. Houses are highly coveted so you can flex on the sprouts. Besides the storage and decorating, they're highly sought after for players to turn them into roleplay nightclubs, taverns, studios where people can take pictures of their characters, and even roleplay brothels. You also need them to advance skills like gardening and also decoration. On top of that, free companies which are player-owned and operated guilds will buy up huge amounts of plots and sometimes entire wards to house high-ranking members and occasionally make roleplay cities, so that everyone can garden together! Houses can be anywhere from 3 million to 50 million gil, which can take a bit of grinding, but money isn't the problem. It's the way the housing system is set up within the game that causes big issues. Sometimes life-ruining issues. See, there are only a select few districts players can own houses within the cities in Final Fantasy XIV. That's the Mists in Lenosha, the Lavender Beds in the Black Shroud, the Goblet in Thanalan, and Shirogane in Hingashi, with a new housing district coming to Ishgard in the upcoming Endwalker expansion. You'd think being a video game and all, there would be an infinite amount of houses available for purchase, you know, like in Club Penguin when you just teleport to your igloo, but no. Much like in real life, Final Fantasy XIV goes the route of having a limited number of houses within the game. That's because of server limitations on Square Enix's end, and fair enough, because each housing district is constantly being loaded into the open world. That's a lot of computing power that needs to be active considering the scope of the game as a whole. As of patch 5.4, there are 24 wards per housing zone per server, and each ward contains 30 plots. That means per server there are a maximum of 5,760 plots. There are 68 servers in total in the game, meaning that the maximum amount of houses there can ever be in Final Fantasy XIV as of right now is 391,680. In actuality, there's more like 2.8 million active monthly players, which is still a huge amount and accounts for the housing shortage. In fact, there's hardly any houses to go around, and this is just going to get worse as Final Fantasy gets more and more popular. The effect that the housing crisis in Final Fantasy XIV has had on the players is huge. In order to buy a house in Final Fantasy, first you have to find an open plot and click on a placard. And that's almost impossible. That's because the only time you ever find an open plot is when people sell, or when someone loses their plot to the 30 days of inactivity rule. But everyone knows how valuable a house is, so no one is selling. And with such little houses to go around, things get really competitive. Even if you know someone is going to sell their house in advance, you're still subject to an invisible random timer that can last anywhere from 30 minutes to 24 hours before the plot is available for purchase. So when you see a placard, all you can do is click and click and click. Take a walk through any housing district and you'll find tons of people just standing outside plots so that they can be the first person to click that placard and get the house. Imagine being in a race with someone, but the way you win is by spam clicking your mouse for hours on end. And this isn't an exaggeration. Some people say they've clicked for 10 to 20 hours just to have the chance to get a house, because let's not forget, you're also competing with 12 other people who are clicking as much as you are. It's not uncommon for people to camp a house for hours on end for days at a time. Some people have spent months logging into the game, going to a plot they hope they can buy, and they just click until they get an injury. You know, with all that clicking and all the time spent sitting and staring at a placard, people are developing carpal tunnel syndrome, injuring their hands, arms, and wrists. They're developing back injuries from sitting so much, and in some cases, even passing out at their computers. They're losing days of their life clicking for a house that might not ever come. And you don't even have to search far and wide to hear these anecdotal housing horror stories either. Some people have clicked for hours on end, missing the plot by half a second to someone they're in a click war with, and some people have spent entire weeks of doing nothing but clicking to land a house. Some people have even lost 12-hour-long click wars to a bot that feels no pain. And the thing is, these stories are pretty common, and with the player base of Final Fantasy XIV growing so quickly, it doesn't seem like this is a problem that's going to have a solution anytime soon. One thing's for certain, this housing crisis isn't good for the longevity of the game, and it's definitely not good for its players. Hopefully, Square Enix can figure it out soon and house the Catboys. In the meantime, there's always apartments. Okay, bye. I just want to give a huge thank you to Karina for these absolutely cute Gubu designs, and you can find her on Twitter here. Thanks for watching. See ya.